The problem with all teaching is we never know what's going on in our students' heads unless we take steps to find out what's going on. Good teachers have always done this. They've always asked questions of a class. They always do what Madeline Hunter called frequent checks for understanding. They ask a question, maybe 6 students would raise their hands. The teacher picks on one of them, and if that student supplies the correct answer, many teachers take that as evidence that the class is ready to move on. But of course, we can't be sure of that because we haven't heard from all the other students in the class. And so too often, the most common practice in classrooms, that idea of checking for understanding by hearing from only a small group of students, doesn't really give teachers good evidence about what's going on in students' heads, so they can't really make good decisions. So the big idea behind eliciting evidence is that if we had better evidence about what's going on in our students' heads, we can make decisions that better match their learning needs. Teachers have always done that, as I said, but typically the questions that teachers ask aren't really well thought through, so that they actually give rather weak evidence. For example, we could ask in a secondary school science classroom, would your weight be the same on the moon? And most children get that right because they see astronauts bouncing around the moon's surface. So they actually say that your weight would be less on the moon. A far more interesting question to ask is, would your mass be the same on the moon? And many students get that wrong because they don't understand the crucial distinction between mass and weight. In primary school maths, we might ask, which is bigger, 0.25 or 0.3? Now that looks like a very simple question, but many children think that 0.25 is bigger than 3 because 25 is bigger than 3. So the first step in effective eliciting evidence is to ask questions that are worth asking, that give us insight into students' learning. The second part of getting effective evidence is to get evidence from everybody in the group, rather than just the usual suspects. The idea is we ask questions in a way that allows us to get evidence from every single member of the class so that we can make decisions that match the learning needs of all of the students in the class, rather than just those who are confident and share their thinking with us. And so the simple idea behind eliciting evidence is better evidence leads to better decisions, which leads to better learning. Now, some people say, that's just good teaching, isn't it? And of course it is. But the reason I think of this as a formative assessment process is it draws attention to the quality of the evidence that you have for the decisions that you need to make. So by thinking about this constant questioning that we do with our students as an assessment process, we think about what evidence do we get and what conclusions does that allow us to draw. So the key idea behind eliciting evidence is that we'll make decisions that better meet the learning needs of our students if we have better ideas about what's going on in their heads right now. The key idea behind eliciting evidence is that if we have better evidence, we'll make better decisions. The question then is, what kind of evidence do we really want? Multiple choice questions can be very helpful if you have a good idea about what the kinds of things that students might be saying are likely to be. But where you have a less structured approach, where you don't exactly know what the options are likely to be, then mini whiteboards can be very effective. So the idea with mini whiteboards is you ask a question and you ask all students to show their answers really quickly. Now, one of the things that teachers often worry about is that students will copy other people's responses, and that is a concern to begin with. But you can very easily tell whether a student is looking at somebody else's work rather than thinking on their own. And if you want to, you can actually have students working on their own and keeping their mini whiteboards hidden, and they all reveal them at the same time. But the big idea here is that mini whiteboards can be really effective if you have students writing a small number of words or a picture or a diagram or a couple of symbols. The important point is it allows the teacher to get information from the whole class really quickly, and then to make a decision about what is the best thing for that class to do in moving forward.